All right, everyone, welcome to the brand new Outplay Podcast here with Globas from Lineage Esports. Say hi.
Hello.
And I'm Johnny Esports from the Resports Radio Show. You normally hear me on Sundays, but now we're doing this new thing on Wednesdays. And look how pretty everything is.
I
Look at
know,
look,
I
look at
know.
this stuff.
It
It's
looks
all
great. It's much better than our 5 second put together, background from before.
yeah, it looks great. We have lots of exciting new stuff to go with you guys. We plan to do this maybe once a week, and not maybe. Yes, we're gonna be doing this once a week, and then have a lot of fun with it. We're gonna talk a lot of League of Legends because that's basically both of our favorite games. Even though I'm playing a lot of Division right now, but uh, yeah, last week was just super fun. The viewers, we got some pretty good feedback about people who liked our coverage of IEM Katowice, and now we're back to talk about the kind of aftermath of that tournament and what that will mean for the rest of these teams through the rest of the split.
And there's a lot to talk about when it comes not only just to the teams, but I guess to the power of each region. I think we kind of got to see. I feel like every time we go to the international tournament, we kind of overhype North America and we overhype Europe, and we just hope that somebody takes down the god tier Koreans and just takes them down a peg. But after this international tournament, we kind of got to see where I would say each region stands, even though we didn't get to see the top teams from each region.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing we were talking about last week about how the only reason to send their top teams was China, and those were maybe the two worst teams there. In kind of like the most ridiculous. Just we talked about how I was overhyping QG, and clearly I was wrong. And this is basically an hour of you were going to tell me about how much of an idiot I am. But we'll move on. Let's go. We'll go region by region of the teams that were in this tournament, what it means for those teams specifically, and what it might mean for the rest of what's going on for the split in those regions. So.
Let's start with China.
Let's start with China. Why not?
I gotta rip you a new one, Johnny. You overhyped everything about it. I will be fair. I did take Royal winning the whole thing.
Right.
Mostly because I underestimated SKT. I felt they were way overhyped going into this, and I felt that Royal was a team that had more ways to win a game than any other team. QG, I felt like we're going to be very strong, but not as hyped as you were. Johnny, this is not the year for the Chinese. This
No.
is
The past couple years has not been the year for the Chinese.
well, yeah, and you know what? It's going into Worlds. Every analyst, you were crazy if you thought otherwise. Like, I believe it was two of the three Chinese teams were favorites to win the whole tournament. And
we talked about we both had LGD to win Worlds.
Yeah,
Like,
and with good reason. And I mean, I feel like they haven't quite recovered as a region since then. And it's something that, like, going into Worlds, we saw fantastic plays from these top Chinese teams.
Yeah.
And we saw, arguably, Worlds contenders. But now, going into this tournament, I was even pessimistic because I didn't feel like the top teams that they were putting in still weren't up to par with anything they had last split. And you saw that. You saw teams just crumble immediately. Mind you, they did use their substitute, Uzi.
Right.
They used him, I believe, in the first few games. I don't think he was used in every game. I might be wrong, though.
No.
But yeah, I think China as a whole has got to get their act together.
Yeah, and it brings us crazy things. You see these two teams, and both QG and Royal are pretty dominant in their region. And then it's always tough to tell how teams get to do an international competition because you just see how well they do against the teams they play against. That's why, like, if you just take previous examples, that's why, like, a TSM in the past or Cloud9 in the past would be so dominant in North America, but the rest of the region isn't really that strong, so they would get to Worlds and just not do super, super well. And I think that's just kind of what you're seeing with these Chinese teams. Like, LGD going into Worlds were looking super strong. Their ability to team fight and each player to individually carry was so strong in China, and they could just do that. They're not able to get away with that on the international stage. And you saw that with the QG Reapers here. Their ability to team fight was their strongest in their region, and they were able to crush a lot of people with just being able to group as five. And you saw them being able to be picked apart by split pushes and not being able to do the same things they do in their region against international competition. So it's it's just it just seems like maybe China as a whole is just not a super strong region if that's how it's going.
I think too. I think China had a bad habit of underestimating their opponents. I mean, Royal. What did Royal lose in the playoffs? Royal lost to Fnatic. Both teams lost Fnatic to get out of the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I think Fnatic was again the dark horse of this tournament and did incredibly well. You know, much better than expected. But I still feel like Fnatic could have been beaten by either of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe both teams vastly underestimated their opponents, and I feel like even in pick and ban, the Chinese teams were not very strong, and I think Fnatic actually had one of the best pick bans of the whole tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was weird to see these teams that, like, I would say were mechanically better than their opponents, you know, talent wise, but were not holding up as a team and were not holding up strategically in any way. Like it was back to the season 3 meta of every Chinese team just wants to team fight you at every waking moment.
And like, oh, and back in season 3 when OMG would do that and just tower dive people and just like it was exciting and great. But I just think everyone is just like so much smarter on how to deal with those kind of things. So even if they're not used to everyone being super aggressive, because that's what usually what comes up. A Chinese team will come up and be really aggressive, and the team won't be used to that because that's not how their teams in their region play. But you saw teams pick apart that in this tournament. They were like, okay, maybe the first thing would surprise them, but from there they already knew how to kind of deal with it, and it's this one trick pony sort of being overly aggressive isn't working for China in the international stage. It's really fun to watch Chinese League of Legends because people on both sides are just doing that, but it's just not quite what's gonna kind of carry you over in this international competition. It's kind of like in regular sports, the whole mantra of like defense wins championships, right? Is like the defensive plays aren't super flashy or anything like that, but you see the teams that are playing more strategically and more smart just being able to play at a better level, even though you have some crazy guys who have the ability to carry on some Chinese teams, but it just doesn't happen because it's such a team game now. Even compared to two seasons ago when I first started watching League of Legends, or I guess 3 seasons now. When I first started watching League of Legends, it was more when Faker first came to the scene. It was more Faker, just go do your thing. You go win the game. Piglet will clean up after you. But now it's like every single part of your team has to be strong enough. That's why you see a guy like Faker playing more supportive champions these days, even though he's such a hard carry, because they just do so much more as a team than it has been in the past.
I agree. I think going into future competition, you know, MSI and Worlds this year, I think China as a whole has to relook at their game plan. And I mean, these top two teams, they didn't lose many games in their own region. And I think that might actually play into their weakness, that they're not used to losing. So I'm hoping this is a wake-up call, but I actually have low expectations for the region as a whole going into MSI or Worlds. I think that they have to expand their strategical play. I feel like they have to work on whether it's getting, I don't know if it's getting different play styles or just learning to win games in different ways. Like singular teams were struggling with that they only had one way to win the game. They didn't know how to win in a different way. And I feel like that's China's struggle, that the only way they win games is by out team fighting. And even like I said about Royal, the only way that they win a game is if bot lane wins, because Mata will shot call like a beast, but if he gets behind, the whole team gets behind.
So moving from like teams that were very used to winning, let's go to Europe and go to some teams that were very used to losing lately.
Yes.
Actually, in Origin and Fnatic. Let's start with Origin just because they didn't make it as far. I would say Origin did about as good as you could have expected them. I don't know how you feel about that.
I very much agree. I think that their expectations may have been higher, and I think that they will probably be upset because they didn't win. They didn't win any games except for one against TSM in a best of 3. But I feel like there was no way they were coming out of that group at all. Like, even if they had beaten TSM, I think they still would have lost to Ever, and I think that they need to take that with a grain of salt. I think Origin has enough internal problems that going to an international tournament is not going to give them anything more than scrim experience.
Yeah, and they can take that forward, that scrim experience, that experience of being here, for what it is. Again, we feel like they did as good as you can kind of expect them. Actually, interesting thing that we just kind of looked at coming before the show. XPeke is now going to draw back into the lineup, replacing Power of Evil for this week in the LCS. How do you feel about what that might potentially mean for this Origin team?
I think it says bad things. I think it says very bad things that they even have to do it. I feel like Power of Evil as a player is mechanically on par with XPK, if not better. But the problem is, and very much in the same playstyle, mind you, too. But the problem is, I feel like that team as a whole has trouble with trouble not just with shot calling, but with respecting people amongst the team. It feels like without a designated leader that they just kind of fall apart and don't know how to control all those egos at once. And I feel like XPeke, being the owner of the organization and such a veteran, was that voice and was that that pillar to fall back on if you didn't know what to do. Whereas Power of Evil doesn't match that in any way, even though mechanically he is an upgrade.
Yeah, the weird thing about Origin, and what I've just been noticing more and more lately, and it was especially exposed in this tournament, is that they've always been such a team. They've been around for like a split, but anyway, they've always been as a team that they wait for you to make a mistake so they can capitalize on it. But in that time of them waiting for a mistake to happen, they're making their own mistake. Whether it's SOAS pushing out too far without wards, or it's amazing making a misplay, or whatever it is. I don't mean to pick up specific players on the team or anything like that, but it just seems like they play this waiting game, but like they're just like, if they played themselves, it would be the most weirdest game in the world, because it'd be both teams waiting to make a mistake while both teams are actively making mistakes.
Yeah,
so
they were bleeding out their base the whole time.
Yeah, they're that guy in solo queue you're playing with who got maybe a kill or two, or is a bunch ahead in CS and doesn't do anything with that lead, and then slowly loses the game. Which is me, by the way, as well. So it's a kind of a weird thing to watch, and you always like throughout the weeks, especially early on in the split, you just thought, okay, Origin will get better because they do have those flashes of this team that made it to the semifinals at Worlds. They have those flashes that, again, we talked about last week, how SOAS can go 8-0 in a game and do some really great stuff.
And also 0-8, as we saw
and
this
also
week.
0-8, exactly. So it's so polarizing, this team's play, that it comes out, if you're inconsistent, you can't win an international stage. You just can't. It's impossible. And even in your own region, Europe is only Origin plays this like halfway gate between the good teams and the bad teams. They're not good or bad, they're just somewhere in the middle. So I think like XPeke apparently is coming in because the Power of Evil is just sick. I honestly could see the team just randomly playing better this one game with XPeke, and then
the
suddenly
Reddit analysts will say XPeke world buff.
Yeah, it's like like exactly. It's kind of like when early on with Cloud9, just anytime High was in there, even though he wasn't doing anything, all of a sudden the team would play better. Weird. Yeah. It might happen. You never know. So I'm actually just interested to see that with this team with Origin. I don't know. There's so much wrong with Origin that you can't even just pick one and a couple little things. There's lots of little things that need to improve, as opposed to just like one big thing that needs to get better. So it's tough. But the other team in this region, Fnatic, they
surprisingly well.
Yeah, and you had them as your dark horse pick, even though like your objective picks were not Fnatic making it out of the groups, but you were like, if there's a dark horse, you'd be picking Fnatic, so I have to give you a lot of credit for that, because my pick for that was CLG. I actually want to start with the game between Fnatic and CLG if we want to talk about that for a bit.
Very much so.
Yeah, because this is this is one of the best of threes I can remember in a little while now. CLG looked pretty dominant in the first game there, and you're like, okay, CLG is going to go on and win like
2-0.
Right, 2-0. They're riding that momentum of beating Immortals and everything I said going into the split, and my pick as them as the dark horse. And then they even start the second game smashing Fnatic there at the beginning of it, and everything is just looking lined up for CLG to make that dark horse appearance into the final, but sorry, Fnatic kind of takes over and comes back to win that game. What did you think about the kind of what was going on through there?
I think Fnatic. Two things happened. I think one, Fnatic as a team, very much stepped up in their cohesiveness. I feel like they were very much playing to the strengths of the team. Like Gamsu did okay. Gamsu did not do great. Gamsu did not do bad. But he stepped up to the plate and he did what he needed to do. I think there's two big things here that won Fnatic those games. One, I said it before, and I'll say it again. Spirit is an amazing aggressive jungler, and they let him loose. They let him do things. Even on games with Gragas, they were backing him up in aggressive plays. They were letting him do things that they were not letting him do in the LCS. They were falling back on that, well, Reignover just farmed up, and let's just let Spirit farm up, and same thing. And Spirit's like, no, I play aggressive. I want to fight the jungler very early. I want to gank very early. I want to control the enemy jungle as quick as possible and get that level advantage. And they let him do that. I mean, we saw some great Lee Sin play out of Spirit. And I think I actually want to make one note from a game in the finals against Faker. There were so many amazing insects. Like, you'd be surprised if you see one good insect in an LCS game with Lee Sin, and you saw multiple great insects out of like the same game from Spirit.
For those that don't know, Insect is basically just very famous for playing Lee Sin as a character. There's Insect montages of just these mad Lee Sin plays that he does. So he's kind of going to become a signature character. So basically, when someone makes just really high mechanical plays with Insect, with Lee Sin rather, they're referred to as an Insect sometimes.
It's a specific move where you're able to jump to the opponent, get behind them, and then ult them into your team. It's very hard to get off. And especially when you're playing at this high level, you don't get it off often. But he did it multiple times on Faker, which says a lot. And the second point of why Fnatic did so well, and you saw it in the most beautiful way possible against CLG, in the Rammus pick. The picks and bans of Fnatic were the best in this tournament. And how do you beat CLG? CLG, the team that wins every game with split pushes, and Darshan literally putting them on his back. You know what you do? You lock in Rammus. Because Rammus counters everything that he plays.
I actually want to make a point on this because the like, if you were watching this game and like knew maybe less about League of Legends and stuff, and you were just listening to what the casters were saying, the casters in that first game, all they were saying was, oh, that Rammus pick was awful. Or what does it do for this team? It doesn't do anything. All of a sudden, they win the next game, and
it was the best pick in the world.
Genius. Yeah. And I'm like, what? How can you say both things?
I know. And it's the Reddit analysts, right? Reddit analysis. And it was... They played it all three games, and we saw it fail in the first game. And even I thought, like, well, it was great because it countered a lot of stuff Darshan plays, because everything Darshan plays is hyper aggressive, hyper carry, split push, AD champs. What does Rammus do? He counters any sort of AD champ, and he will win any 1v1 against an AD champ. But it didn't work out in the first game, and I don't think that was just the pick. I think that was a lot of other reasons. But
yeah.
And if you notice in all three games, Darshan was forced onto an AP champion. He doesn't play AP champions top very rarely.
Vladimir was super not impressive.
No, and in the first game, even in the game they won, the Vladimir was not the reason why they won. No. And he played Echo, I believe, in the second game, and then Vladimir in the third game. And he wasn't able to do what he does for CLG, which is split push like a machine, because Rammus.
And then when you watched him, sorry to cut you off, but when you watch him try to split push, he's just throwing blood at this tower, and it's like, that does no damage.
No, it was terrible. And then Rammus could walk up, press R, and destroy the whole wave in 5 seconds.
Exactly.
And then not to just talk about the picks and bans, the itemization out of Rammus was insane. You saw it after the first game. He realized, oh, you know what I should do? Instantly buy a Banner of Command. First item, get Banner of Command both games, and you know what it does? The Banner of Command, it upgrades a minion, and it reduces all magic damage. So you force Darshan into a magic damage champion, and then build Banner of Command, so he can't deal any magic damage to a minion. And now you've just completely destroyed any sort of split push he's ever wanted in this game. And CLG, as we're starting to see, is doing the Chinese thing where they can only win by one playstyle, which is split pushing. Yeah. And Fnatic just outplayed them in picks and bans.
I think we're going to talk about NA in a bit, but I think that's one of the worst things that can happen to CLG is seeing how their strategy can be exposed so badly. And I think teams in NA better have been watching.
They were taking notes.
Yeah, exactly, and take notes on that. So yeah, Fnatic goes on to win that game. Then they go up against Royal up next.
Yep.
And Royal, your favorite to pick to make it to win the whole thing, and mine, I at least have them in the top 4. They go to play their best of 3 against them, and even after those wins, you kind of felt like, well, Fnatic's got to be burning out. Like, they just played a really tough best of 3. You would think they would come into this game and have a lot of trouble with this Royal team that was a favorite for a lot of people. But this ends up being an extremely interesting series as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm trying to remember the series. I believe I only caught the 2 games of it because it was later in the day. I feel like it was one of those games that either team could have won. I will still argue I feel like Royal could have won the game because they were pretty close up until I think the 3rd game was a complete stomp by Fnatic, if I remember correctly. Yeah. But the first 2 were very close games that I felt like could have gone either way. And I feel like Fnatic, again, had the better pick and bans, and I feel like that Fnatic had... we're starting to see a lot of great synergy out of Klaj. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Their new support, and I feel like...
I believe it is a soft J. I think it's Klai.
Klai? Okay. Well, yeah. Klai and Reckless are getting a lot
Someone on chat, correct us if you know.
Yeah. I mean, good luck with that. It's yeah. But Reckless and Klai have gotten a lot of synergy now, and I feel like they're going to carry that back to Europe. And I think that the expectations we're going to see out of Europe are very high for the top tier teams, which is the teams currently leading in H2K, G2, and Unicorns, as well as Fnatic now. And I think that it's going to be a great race to the playoffs for these last few games for Europe. And I think that even in the finals, Fnatic showed that I would say an upper middle class class of a European team was able to go, I'm going to say toe-to-toe with SKT in the first rounds, which was great. And you could tell they surrendered the 3rd game because they were tired.
they were just done playing League of Legends. They're just like, man, just they played so much, and they just knew, like, SKT is this team. I think I tweeted in the middle of their series there. I'm like, SKT is just this team. It's like the Detroit Red Wings in the '90s when it comes to hockey. Other teams can play with them for a while, and it looks like we're playing with them, and then you lose. You're like, oh man, we played with them. We could have done that, but they win every game.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, you didn't. That's just the game they let you play for a while until they found the opportunity to take over and win. And we'll move on to Korea in a bit, but that's just kind of what happened with SKT in that final series. But again, Fnatic here, they play a crap load of League of Legends in a very short period of time and are able to make it to the finals, and that's awesome stuff for them. We saw Reckless bring out the Jhin pick, which basically was what started saving them too as well. It helped them in the game against CLG. It eventually drew bans, and no one thought we were gonna start seeing Jhin bans, but Reckless on a late game carry, it just looks unstoppable, and I'm looking forward to this week in the LCS as we see more Jhin picks come out.
I agree very much so. I actually thought it was going to get picked up by somebody. I didn't know who was going to play it, but I'm not surprised that it was as strong as it was, just because I've seen some Jhin players play very, very well, but it was one of those things that I knew it would have.
Even when you watch just streams, just regular Twitch streams, not even like competitive play, and you're watching like Sneaky or someone play Jhin, and it's just like, it's not great. Yeah, so all you ever thought was like, this isn't great. You can play something else, like, and just have more just have something going in your mid game because like that, like especially in the LCS, if you have a lot of times a weak mid game is really hard to get over
Yeah,
in
that is true.
competitive play. But they were looking to show that they can bring out a comp where they can get over that weak mid game of Jins, and were able to get some really strong carries out of them. So it's pretty cool to watch. All right, let's move on from there. We still have to talk about North America and Korea. Which one do you want to go to next?
You know what? Let's go Korea because I think Korea is a very quick one to go over.
All right, cool.
I think there's not much to talk about. Honestly, I think it's another Origin. I think that they did well. They took a game off of TSM and they showed weakness in the best of 3 versus TSM. And we talked about how there's one of those teams that like we don't know much about because there's not too much video coverage of their gameplay because they're a challenger team. Keep that in mind that they're not even in the Korean version of the LCS, which is the LCK.
Yeah.
They are a challenger team in Korea, and they went to an international tournament and did okay. And I think that's all you can expect from them. And I think that they should be happy with this. I think they get a little bit of money in their pocket. Hopefully this is a little bit more experience for them to try and qualify for the LCK. But I think they met all expectations. They didn't surpass them, but they didn't fall beneath what you would have expected from a challenger team.
Yeah, that's perfect because like this is one of those teams like if again I do a lot of comparisons to regular sports coming from that background, but like that's like the Jets made the playoffs last year and they made it there and they lost the first round. And you're like, not good. You guys made it there. That's we're happy that you did that. But if they were the Chicago Blackhawks and they lost in the first round, you'd be appalled. But because of where they sit, you're like, okay, well you got that far and you got this experience. That's only be positive for you going forward. So does what they did. They get more exposure to some people who didn't maybe know who they were as they've only been kind of playing in Korea. So they're a pretty fun team, and I look forward to them being a not challenger team eventually, and we'll see how they grow. But we move on to the eventual champions of this tournament, SKTT1. Coming into the tournament, they were looking like SKT was falling from grace, that hangover from winning Worlds that happens to every team, frankly. And they just didn't have a great start. They're not having a great start to the split. They're a little bit in the high middle class of the LCK, and they come into this tournament maybe with the most question marks that we've seen SKT come into an international tournament. But they do win it. So what did you think about their performance there?
I think Blank showed up. I think that was really great to see. We were not expecting. I was expecting a lot worse gameplay out of Blank because he hasn't had much stage experience, but he really showed up, and I think that this doesn't bode well for Bengi because you might start seeing Blank in more LCK games, and I think that honestly we saw some incredible carry out of Bang, and I even said that before where even though there's Faker, I think you're going to see a lot of Bang carry comps, and there were, and we saw him really step up to the plate, and I think that as much as yes, they did win. Yes, they did great. I think that there was still some weakness to be shown, and I think that we're kind of, seeing that gods do bleed because they didn't look strong in every game. In fact, I would argue that if there was any other player in anywhere in League of Legends in any region, there was a few team fights that I think would have been lost, but because it's Faker, he was able to turn it around. I mean, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see the insect that was denied? I
don't remember.
There was a team fight where Spirit had made an incredible play where he insect over a wall, and Faker was on Corki, and I believe he did not have his jump at the time, so he got on him, and he insect Faker into the enemy team. And what should have happened if it was any other player was they would have landed in the center of Fnatic. They would have died, and then Fnatic would have steamrolled the rest of the team fight because it was in that perfect position. But here's what did happen. The moment he got kicked in the middle of the air, he cleansed the knockback. Now, when you cleanse the knockback, it doesn't stop it, but it lets you move out of it. So he was able to cleanse the knockback and then flash out of it. So where he started, he should have ended in the middle of Fnatic, but instead he ended even farther from Fnatic because he was able to cleanse and flash it so quickly. And the reaction time to do that is about like a half a second to hit these 2 keys in succession. And if you press them in the other order, you would have just wasted both of them for nothing.
Yeah.
But he hit both of them perfect succession.
Yeah. The funny thing is for me, like just to put this in reality, just in perspective of how hard this is, you have to also have the perception that you go, I even have flash or both of your summoners like available.
And to be expecting the insec.
Yeah, because like if I'm thinking about this play happening as you're explaining it to me, and I'm like, I would look down at my cooldowns and see, oh, I have cleanse, and by the time I looked at it, I would already be kicked back in the fight and dead. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even have enough time to look and make sure. He'd have to already remember that he had that, and then make all these plays happen. So like he like. I'm obviously not in Faker's brain, but he has to, in his brain, go, if this happens, I'm just doing this. Mm-hmm. I am going to cleanse and then flash out. And he's pre-planning that, like, well before anyone else would even think about it. And it's...
I know. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I think that even if I sat down with you and me, and we sat in a custom game, and we had you on court, we tried to purposely do it, even with you expecting the insec at all times, I think it would take us a good dozen tries to even possibly get it. Like, we would be sitting there forever just to get it. And the fact that he was able to do it was actually, I think, why they won the game. It was absolutely insane. And I think that, even though they are the strongest team internationally right now, their record is insane. And we have seen in the past SKT come out of international tournaments and be like, oh, well, right now they're only in the middle of the pack. And then they come to an international tournament, do insane, and then go back to Korea and just take home the championship. Yeah. Like, it's no big deal. It's just another year for SKT. And it's really fun to see that we might see that again and just have a flashback from a few years ago and be like, okay, maybe they're just going to go and win Worlds now for the third time. But I do think that the experience was good because they were only facing middle-tier teams from other regions. And even though they look strong, I think that come Worlds, we might see the gap between Europe and North America in relation to Korea shrink. I think we might see, like last Worlds, we saw only SKT looked ahead of the pack. The rest of the Korean teams, excited, KOO stepped up in the tournament, but they still lost like a game to Flash Wolves and teams you wouldn't expect them to lose to. And I think that we might see more of that and more of a fight towards the end of the World Championships, which I'm really hoping for. I don't want a simple SKT flawless World Championship again.
Yeah. Okay, and we've talked about how much we don't like the kind of the format of IEM, and the weird thing about it too is like they play. If you win your first 2 games and you go through as the winners and you're your number 1 seed going into the semifinals, and then the losers bracket plays a bunch of best of 3s. So this tournament is basically showing off the worst teams of the tournament. If you lose, you get to play more League of Legends, whereas the best teams play less, which seems like a really weird way to sell your game. Yeah, that's so unfortunate about this. I wanted to see more SKT games because sure, they won every game, they swept Worlds, they swept this one, and you could just say those statements and that's it. But like, I would have liked to have seen them in more scenarios and seen the best team play more games as opposed to the worst teams play more games. Like, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, you almost think like the winners should have to play the best of 3 to ensure that number 1 spot. And the loser is like, well, you lost your first game, so your disadvantage is that you have a less of a chance to win your next game. But you get more chances, which is really weird and brings us to North America and how TSM was able to make their way into the semifinals. So going to North America's region, we've talked a little bit about CLG and TSM here do make it to the semifinals after winning a best of 3 against Ever. It's almost like a good for them, but it is a better performance than we maybe thought we would see out of TSM.
Yeah, I think that TSM was not like Fnatic levels of Dark Horse or that much exceed expectations, but they did exceed expectations. I think they go home happy, and God, it was so nice to see TSM not just deathball every game. Ironically, the one game they lost was a game I saw them do nothing but deathball, which is where they were just grouping as 5 and they would just wait for a team fight and then they would lose to a Korean team fight, and it's like, yeah, it's gonna happen. But you saw against Origin and against Ever, they were actually making plays around the map. They were doing things. They were making rotations. They were taking objectives. They weren't just, let's just try a group as 5 and push in a tower and see what happens. And oh my gosh, you saw not Faker. I'm having a moment today. You saw Bjergsen on LeBlanc. You saw for the first time since this new TSM roster, you saw Bjergsen play a carry mid laner. You saw him actually putting the team on his back. And it's like you started to have flashbacks of the old TSM. And you saw Svenskeren get early game advantages. You saw him actually do things in the early game. Like it used to be Svenskeren tries to do things, fails miserably, and then it relies on Hanser to win lane. And then it went from there. And then they would try and deathball, and that was it. But you actually saw Hanser was not the reason why these games were won. It was everybody. It was a collective effort, and it was amazing to see just them actually do something, because it was getting aggravating to see this team that was like, well, let's just group up in the mid lane. It was like solo queue, like, oh, let's group up mid lane. Let's try and push something in and see what happens. And that was it. But then you actually saw some team fights out of them. That was really good.
Yeah, and which we saw, and I said this coming into the tournament, is like basically a lot of what TSM is, because they had a puncher's chance with Bjergsen to be able to win some games and take themselves somewhere, and it proved that Bjergsen playing on that LeBlanc was able to carry and play really strong, and not just like carry where the rest of the team is bad and he has to carry the team with them. It means the rest of the team was able to be there to support him in doing that, and not being losing other places and being able to make plays. So this TSM team did pretty much the best I think they could have done.
I agree.
Yeah. That's basically it. And they're going to take that back to North America and hopefully use that experience to be like, hey, we were able to do this on this stage. We know what we can do. I hope they know what their strengths are by now. Because if they don't at least know what their strengths are, they'd be really lost. And they just need to focus on their strengths. So I think focusing on your weaknesses sometimes makes you just do your things that are your weaknesses, which is sometimes getting caught out, the bot lane getting caught out despite having leads in CS and different things, but they hopefully can kind of take that and prove that they are this quote unquote super team that they're supposed to be. And I don't even mean for them to be like this sudden super team that suddenly is a contender at Worlds. I just want them to be a contender in North America now.
I agree. I think that what we saw here was a tug of war, and I've talked about this before, how the whole cohesion of the team is just a tug of war between the personalities of Bjergsen and the bot lane of Doublelift and Yellowstar. And I think, and I might be wrong here, but I think that we saw Bjergsen win the tug of war at this tournament, because they played around Bjergsen, they played around him getting ahead with LeBlanc and making plays, and with Zillion even as well. And if you had heard, I don't know if you listened into it, there was about an 8-minute leaked comms. They had accidentally leaked the communications of a scrim match that TSM was in instead of the actual casters in the middle of the game. So all you heard was TSM's communications amongst them for about 8 minutes. And if you listened into it, you heard why they're struggling. And it was, you would hear Yellowstar talk about what the plan is, like what the goal is, and what we're doing on the map. And then you would hear Bjergsen yell over him. And you would hear okay, guys, we're just going to play a little bit passive, and we're just going to play for that dragon in about a minute. Let's wait it out, let's go. And then in the middle of the sentence, you hear Bjergsen all right, guys, we're going to go really aggressive. We're going to go in the mid lane. We're going to go for a team fight. Let's go hard. And it was just I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the ways, we saw Bjergsen be like, all right, this tournament, it's my turn. It's my turn. Yellowstar, I get it. You're great. Give me one tournament. Let me do the consoling. I'll win. And they're just like, LeBlanc's meta now, just let me play it and we'll win. And it worked. And I don't know if it's a great long-term plan, but it did work. So, and their only loss, I mean, mind you, they did lose an opening game against Ever, but their loss in the tournament was to SKT. So it's like, well, you lost to the eventual winners of the tournament. It's going to happen.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and honestly, if you were to ask me at the beginning of the season, like, yeah, I thought TSM was going to be really, really strong. But if you ask me the question, how would they be weak? Or what could be disappointing? If you asked me out of picking each player, I would not have picked Yellow Star as the one player where I would have went, that guy will disappoint.
That is a very good point.
And to be honest, so far, Yellow Star seems to have been the most disappointing. It's like it's really hard to quantify shot calling when you're just watching the game and you're like, okay, he's the shot caller, so he's the one making the calling. So it's his fault when a team there's so much going on, and obviously we don't normally get that leaked comms coverage. So even though that was supposed to be what he brought best to the table, there has been just a lot of times with Yellow Star, even in this tournament, where he's being caught out and lost in places where him and Double Lift aren't doing the same thing.
Yes.
And it's really, and like a lot of the times with League of Legends, if you're playing at home, you're playing solo queue or whatever you're doing, even if you think your team is doing the wrong thing, it's still sometimes better to just do what the rest of the team is doing so that you're at least doing the same thing together. And I feel like Yellow Star doesn't have a voice with this team because sometimes he's doing what he feels is the best, and then his team's not just automatically with him like they have been in the past. That's what it seems like. Again, it's really hard to tell without actually being in the communication or anything like that. So it's kind of tough, but yeah, maybe it just this tournament. The reason why things seemed to work was because it went Bjergsen shot calling. It's like at least if everyone's listening to Bjergsen, then everyone's listening to someone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that their goal going back to North America is going to be to solidify that shot calling. I think you're right. They need to learn their strengths, and if they don't realize it by now, they're not going to make MSI. They're not going to make Worlds even. And I think that honestly, they could probably make both of those as long as they play to one, the play style of let Bjergsen carry or let Doublelift carry. But I don't want that, and I don't want this linear team that we're seeing out of like CLG. I want to see a team that is North America's World's contender. I want to see the super team that I go to bed dreaming about ever since the roster was announced. I want Yellow Star, one of the West's best shot callers, to be taking these mechanical gods and just putting them to work like a puppet master. Like just put them on a leash, force them to listen, and he will tell you what to do. But we're seeing that they're just a bunch of wild dogs that don't follow orders. And that might get them to Worlds, but it's not going to get them past groups at Worlds. And if we move over to CLG now, I think it's the opposite. I think that their shot calling is great. Their cohesiveness is great. Their team fighting is great. Their picks and bans are pretty good, but we saw two big weaknesses come out of this team. One, they favor split pushing way too much. Way too much.
To a predictable amount. It's fine to have that as your main strategy, but it's so easy. Well, granted, like a lot of teams have been driving.
They couldn't adapt.
But this in the last best of 3 they played, which they don't play best of 3s in the regular season of the NALCS. They've shown that a team can adapt and then take you down, which could be in trouble for them come playoffs.
And in a meta where there is so many ZZ Rots, so many banners command, all you're going to see out of every game versus CLG now is either Rammus or Nautilus and a ZZ Rot and banner of command. And then it's going to be like, what does CLG do? Because every other North American team saw this tournament and was just like, oh, geez, locking in Rammus is what counters CLG entirely. Done.
Entirely.
So hopefully CLG, saw this and was like, yeah, you know what, we're really great at split pushing, but we should probably learn something else. Which is funny because CLG has this incredibly long, like multi-season history of just let's let Doublelift win the game. Let's farm everything to Double Lift. Let's push it all onto his back. Get to that late game, and then Double Lift just be a mechanical god and win the game. And they don't have that anymore. So they were like, gee, who's the next best mechanical thing on our team? Darshan! Let's shovel everything onto you. Yeah. You can split push. You can win the game. But it's not working. It worked in North America, and it's working a little too much in North America, but it's not working in the international stage.
I think, I touched on it. I think it's a result of North America being completely best of ones.
I agree.
I think people don't want to try. They go like, we're just gonna bring out our team's best strategy against in a one game or whatever, and then that wins or loses. Whereas I think you have a best of three. Maybe the first game, let's bring our best strategy. And the second game's like, well, we lost one already, so let's just try to do something else. And if we lose, well, we lost that first game, and then too bad. Whereas like you saw here, Fnatic were able to go, well, let's just bring out a strategy we think we can try. If it loses the first game, we know how to do it better the second game. Mm-hmm. So it's not just Fnatic trying to bring out their best strategy over and over again in each game. It's them going, this is a strategy we know will beat you if we play it right, so that we can try that over and over again.
And you get 3 shots at it.
And you get 3 shots at it. Yeah, exactly. Even if you lose it for game, you get 2 more shots. It's like...
And if this was LCS, that would have been it. CLG would have won, that would have been it. But because it was best of 3... You know, it didn't work in the first game. That doesn't mean the pick was bad. It just means it didn't work out. And in the second game and the third game, they were like, we know this works. We just have to get it right.
Right.
And,
exactly.
And I think that CLG... Go ahead.
Or if it wasn't working for whatever, if they really felt that Rams pick wasn't right or whatever the reason they lost that game, they can change it at that point. There's so many games I watching this season in the NALCS and the EULCS where like they win the one game and I'm like, I really want to see what would happen if they played right now again.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
I agree.
And they're switching to that next split in NA, and then EU they're doing best of 2s, which is an interesting thing. But it needs it. For the region to get stronger, it needs that, because you're seeing other teams know how to play like that and get better and not just be one-trick ponies.
CLG.
Like CLG. And I really liked what CLG did. I think they were really strong in that first game as Fnatic. Even in the second game as Fnatic, they were really strong, and they just kind of like lost in the late game there. And I think CLG did have a pretty solid tournament. And there are better things for this team as long as they can focus on, whereas I think TSM needs to focus on their strengths. I think CLG needs to focus on working on those weaknesses.
Yes, and I'm going to bring up 2 of those big weaknesses. Huhi and Stixxay. I think I talked about this going into IEM, that I felt like CLG was going to be the most cohesive and the best team when it came to shot calling, and the best team when it came to rotations. And I think Fnatic stepped up and took that title, but I think that they still were very much ahead of the pack in shot calling and in cohesiveness. But Huhi and Stixxay were just losing everywhere. Like, you saw lane matchups that Stixxay should at least be going even or ahead, and he's behind in CS. You know, like, he hasn't died, but he's down 15 CS. And you saw Huhi, you know, never really win lane. Like, I said about this going into the tournament that he was going to be facing some of the world's best mid laners. I mean, my God, you're facing Faker. I'm trying to remember which all teams that he faced specifically. Febivin and Faker. Yeah, that's the 2 teams they played against. And it's like, if you're playing on an international team, you have to be able to step up and do something. But it's like, he never really did. And I think that, and I joke about this, I think I messaged you during the tournament and joked to you that, oh man, if they had a really mechanical, a better mid laner and AD carry like Pole Belter and Double Lift, they'd be so strong.
For example, off the top of my head.
Yeah, which were former players for CLG.
If you don't know them.
Yeah, and I said, if they had this, they'd be so good. And the truth is that I think that one of 2 things needs to happen. And I don't know which will happen. One, to be fair, this is Huhi and Stixxay's first LCS split.
Right.
And in North America, they are very much LCS level players, but they're not showing up on the international stage. But they still have time. Even if we ignore MSI here, they have months and months and a whole split of best of 3s that they could potentially get so much stage practice that they're serviceable for Worlds. And I think Aframu played like out of his mind. I think that it was.
Oh yeah.
The game was basically The game was basically, if Stixay was the football, Afro was the best linebacker you've ever seen. Like, he was insane. In fact, there were so many situations where I was looking at it and I'm like, oh, here you see Stixay being caught out. Oh, Stixay missed a skill shot. Oh, it's gonna be a kill. And then you saw Afro solo killing Reckless.
Yeah.
Like Fnatic's AD carry. The support was doing that, and it was like, oh my gosh, they're actually winning lane right now because of Afro.
For you people at home that like, oh, you don't think supports can carry, Afro is the number one example right now on that it's possible. It's not easy. It's probably harder to carry on a support than it is on other things. But that even goes to prove how impressive Afro is. How many thresh hooks he's landed on Mad Life like predictions on their flashes and stuff. Mm-hmm. It was insane in this tournament, and yeah, like you said, like imagine if he had an 80 carry behind him that was better than 6A, then they got something going. But
I do think it's something that they can work on. I do think it's I don't think it's just like TSM. I don't think they're going to fall out of the top tier of NA. I don't see that happening. I think there's still leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of the other teams. But I do think that when it comes to international play, they really need to step up. And I'm hoping that this is just a matter of, this was Stixay's first international tournament, and I believe who he's as well. So, maybe it's just a matter of stage fright. Maybe it's just a matter of they're just not used to playing against these other players. So it's possible. And I'm hoping that they fix that in time. And TSM is the opposite, where I think that they need to get their act together, because mechanically they should all be doing great in these tournaments, but they need to learn how to work as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if we look at these teams going back to their respective regions, I think that TSM and CLG, it's gonna be a what's the word I'm looking for? Experimentation period where you're top tier, you're probably going to make it to Worlds no matter what in North America, but start doing different things, start playing around, just get other comps, get other ideas if you're CLG. If you're TSM, work on your shot calling, work on your cohesiveness as a team, work on your rotations, because they were great in some of those games, but please don't fall back on that death ball again.
Yeah.
And in Europe, I think that Fnatic, I think, is going to come back and ride this wave and do a lot better. And I think if they don't do better, then that's something wrong. They need to inch ahead of those top tier teams in Europe, and I feel like they have it. Origin is just too much to talk about. It's
too much to improve. There's just too much to improve that I don't see plausible without exchanging players somehow.
Yeah, I agree. I think that unless they literally like put millions of dollars in Daylor's pocket and got like that kind of coach, it's just not going to happen. I think that they need a pillar of someone they respect and somebody who can shut them up, sit them down, and say, listen, this is how you're playing the game. You need to get your act together. And I think in China, China as a region needs to sit their game up.
Just to be better. Yeah.
They do. Like, I think that this is proven that like you had some of the best teams in the history of League of Legends last split, and you didn't make it out of groups. And then you go into this one, and you're like, okay, maybe they learned the lesson. Maybe they bounce back. This is their time. They're sending their best two teams. The other regions aren't, and yet they don't do it. They did not step up the one time. They had an incredible advantage, and they didn't step up.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I was just say on China, it's so hard to watch these teams face plant at international competition because, again, I mentioned it earlier, they do so strongly in their own region that and it's so hard to compare to other things. You're like, maybe the competition is not as good, but it's like you see so much potential out of what China's teams provide and what they bring to the table that it's so ridiculous. And again, you mentioned it earlier, maybe they just underestimate teams every time they come to an international tournament, but at some point that's got to stop. Because I think China has the ability to be the second best region in the world, but they just don't bring it to the table when they have to.
I agree. I think for Korea, it's just
keep doing
what you're doing. Like,
yeah,
honestly,
you got it right.
I think that it's interesting that we got a new storyline out of Ever, where it's like, oh, like this is a team on the verge of LCK. This is a new storyline. That's really cool to have. It's not the storyline of just we're the gods of Korea. But I mean, for the rest of them, that don't rock the boat. You're doing great. I'm glad, and they did it with a substitute, so there's not much else to say.
I think the only thing for Korea, which is not their fault, is that IAM needed to have a better format so we could have seen the Korean teams play more.
Yes, I agree, 100%. But I do want to hear real quick, because I was going to go over my regions real quick, which I did. I want to hear your final thoughts on you said China a bit and Korea maybe, but of Europe and North America. What you think maybe the teams and the regions have to do in a nutshell.
Right. I think we talked about North America at length, and I think TSM needs to focus on carrying their strengths and knowing what they are strong at, knowing what they're good at, and going forward with that. I think what's happening with their shot calling potentially, again, it's hard to tell without communications, is that Yellow Star is trying to tell them to do things that aren't part of the team's strengths. And since this tournament, it did seem like Bjergsen was making the shot calls. He was doing the things that the team is strong at. And that might be playing that LeBlanc at mid and putting more resources there so that they can be stronger there. It's tough because it might make you a one-trick pony, but you at least have to have that one trick before you can have a second trick. So come on, TSM. And then, CLG, they just got to... Their players can just be a little bit better mechanically, and we talked about Hughie and we talked about Stixay and that, but I think they're on the right track. They have the opposite problem with TSM, where you have your one trick now, you need to make a second one and be able to have another strategy. And it's really hard when your best carry is your split pushing top laner, and then your next best player is your support, which you're not gonna make a comp around your support. So all they do is keep making comps around their best top laner. So let's see what they can do. I'm really excited for CLG going forward. I'm probably the most excited about CLG that I've ever been, and that's including CLG that won North America last season. So I think they have a lot of potential and could be really strong. I look forward to that. I'm really, really interested to see if Fnatic can do not much more this split, but next split once it's best of twos. Because you saw them be able to play best of threes real well in this tournament.
Picks and were phenomenal.
Guys were great, and they brought it all the way to the finals. And sure, they got rickrolled by SKT, but I think they played 1 trillion games before that, and that's not 100% their fault to play against the best team in the world and get destroyed by them. So I'm really interested to see how that goes forward, as well as that Jin pick out of Reckless, to see how that's going to affect their region and all of competitive League of Legends going forward for at least the first couple patches. Origin, they became my favorite team in Europe, and they don't look good. They just don't look good. And for me, I've people might call me out on this on the radio show because I say it a lot, but Soaz to me is someone who I don't think he's on the team's game plan when he just farms forever and it's like, good, we need you to be farm forever and get strong, but why are you going all the way through without wards? It's like, it's really simple solo queue mistakes people make, and like really low levels, and it's really hard for me to understand.
LCS junglers know how to take advantage of.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to understand a high-level competitive player making those kind of mistakes.
I agree wholeheartedly.
That's a mistake you stop making once you reach gold or something.
No, it doesn't.
Not that I would know, because I'm silver.
It doesn't stop there. You get it in diamond. So
I'm allowed to make those mistakes. You can't.
All right, I'm gonna throw something at you, a little bit fun.
Sure.
We didn't talk about this beforehand. I'm gonna call it right now. You know, we're the Outplay Podcast, Johnny. What is our Outplay of the week? I am gonna nominate the top lane Rammus pick from Fnatic. I think that it completely outplayed CLG's comp. It completely shut down Darshan, and the itemization of the banner command was just amazing. And I think that they literally won the best of 3 with that pick. So what is your outplay of the week?
I'm gonna go with Jin, picking Jin and making people ban Jin. Because in that first game against with Fnatic there and Royal, you saw Jin come out and be super strong, and then forcing Royal to pick a second to pick Jin to not to get it off of Reckless there in the second game. They win that game, and then guess who gets Jin again in the third game? Royal tries to pick it up again, but Reckless was able to carry that game with a 3-1 and 13 Kalista with a Kalista Lulu comp. So I think the outplay was like, hey, look how strong I can play this Jin. You have to take this away from me. Okay, cool. We're gonna make this comp that's much better around it anyway. And it's just, I think the pick of Jin and getting that strong with it, even if you're not using it, was really strong. So I don't know how many games what's his face on Royal has as Jin.
Pekko? Or
yeah.
Uzi? I can't remember who they were playing with at the game. I think it was Pekko.
Yeah, so I don't know how many games he has playing with them, but it clearly wasn't good enough. Yeah.
I will say though, neither of us went for the Faker anti-insect, and I'm gonna have to send you a VOD of that later.
Yeah, I have to see that because I'm sure I saw it because I was watching all the games, and my brain doesn't remember it right now. So I would have maybe picked that if I remembered it. But I just remember being so impressed by like what Reckless being on Jin did to picks and ban, made people ban a character people didn't think needed to be banned, and it's pretty cool.
That's a fair point. So I guess for closing thoughts, this is the Outplay Podcast. We're planning on doing it every week. We'll be here live, or as live as we can be at 8 p.m. On a Wednesday, and basically we're gonna talk about League of Legends every week, and we're gonna try and keep you guys informed about what's going on in the LCS and what our thoughts are, and it's going to be a little less exciting when there's no international tournaments, but there's going to be a lot of interesting storylines.
But there's so much going on in League of Legends all the time that there's always something for us to talk about, and it's always
I agree.
Show, I think. And this was great. If anyone, you can see the social media stuff below and all that. If you want to check out some of the other stuff I do also host another radio show on Sundays at 4 p.m. on CKUW 95.9 FM in Winnipeg, or you can tune in online at ckuw.ca, as well as I do a web series that's about people playing a game called The League. Called Into the League.
Which is in no way related to anything.
No way related to what
game.
Riot Games makes.
Nope, not at all.
No, not at all. Riot Games, who now owns 2 games. But
they're now plural.
They're now plural, officially. So yeah, check out IntoLeague.com as well as the Facebook there at read.intoleague.com. Or Facebook.com/read.intoleague. I know English. All right.
We're tired. Let us sleep. This was fun. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.